On the evening of December 23, 1985, Sunvalley Mall in Concord, California was overflowing with holiday shoppers. Christmas was just 48 hours away, and the mall was buzzing with families buying last-minute gifts, lining up to see Santa, or settling into seats at the mall's large cinema for a festive movie. It was loud, crowded, and completely ordinary. Until, without warning, it wasn't. At 8:35 p.m., something tore through the mall's skylight. In seconds, a normal shopping night turned into chaos, fire, and confusion, altering hundreds of lives forever. Just north of the mall sat Buchanan Field Airport, a facility with a long and complicated history. Built in the 1940s, it was originally intended to serve civilian air traffic. But before construction was even completed, the United States entered World War II, and the unfinished airport was taken over by the U.S. Air Force. After years of military use, the land was eventually returned to Contra Costa County and reopened for civilian aviation. At the time, Buchanan Field was isolated. Concord was small, and the surrounding land consisted mostly of open fields and walnut groves. For an airport, that separation was ideal. But over the decades, both the airport and the city grew. By 1977, Buchanan Field had become one of the 20 busiest airports in the United States, and Concord had expanded right up to its borders. Office buildings, roads, and commercial developments steadily replaced farmland. This rapid development raised concerns. Some city planners questioned whether certain buildings near the airport were too tall. In one case, a structure was discovered to exceed FAA height limits by just over 2 meters, or about 7 feet, and had to be physically lowered. While the issue was corrected, worries about safety near the airport never fully disappeared. Opened in 1967, Sunvalley Mall was not initially seen as a risk. Located roughly 1 kilometer south of the airport, the mall was relatively low to the ground. Although it sat beneath some flight paths, it didn't attract the same scrutiny as the taller office buildings closer to the runways. The mall itself was a major attraction. Anchor stores like Sears, Macy's, and JCPenney drew shoppers from across the region. Inside, visitors found a food court, lush indoor landscaping, decorative fountains, and large skylights that flooded the space with daylight. With parking for nearly 9,000 cars and a 1,500-seat movie theater, Sunvalley Mall proudly claimed the title of the largest fully air-conditioned indoor mall in the world at the time. On that December night, the mall was packed. Santa Claus was greeting children near Macy's, and a short line of families waited their turn. Among them was 23-year-old Kim Aguirre and her 3-year-old son, Mario. Just minutes before disaster struck, the woman standing ahead of Kim stepped away to retrieve her child, who had wandered off. She motioned for Kim and Mario to take her place in line. Moments later, a violent explosion shook the building. The ceiling burst apart. Glass, metal, and debris crashed down as a massive fireball dropped from above. The woman who had just stepped aside was crushed by falling wreckage. Kim was thrown to the ground, her clothes engulfed in flames. Shoppers screamed as burning fuel spread across the floor, smoke filled the air, and the power suddenly failed. Heat caused glass decorations to shatter, adding to the terror. No one immediately understood what had happened. Many believed it was a bomb, a gas explosion, or even an earthquake. The sudden shift from holiday cheer to devastation was so extreme that some people froze, unable to process what they were seeing. One Vietnam War veteran later said the scene reminded him of a napalm strike. But the fireball had not come from a bomb. It came from above. A twin-engine Beechcraft Baron aircraft had slammed through the mall's skylight, dumping burning aviation fuel and debris directly onto the shoppers below. At the controls was 67-year-old Jim Graham, a highly experienced pilot and World War II veteran with thousands of flight hours. He had later founded his own air services company. That evening, he was returning home after flying his company's secretary to her hometown for Christmas. 2 passengers were with him, a 23-year-old aspiring pilot, eager to observe an experienced aviator, and a 48-year-old personal friend who had joined Graham for the company during the flight. When the aircraft struck the mall, it became lodged in the shattered roof structure. The fuselage burned as it hung above the mall interior. There was no escape. All 3 occupants died, either from impact injuries or the fire that followed. Below, the effects were catastrophic. Burning fuel sprayed across dozens of people. Some were pinned beneath wreckage, while others were burned by molten roofing tar and fire. Shoppers and employees immediately tried to help. Burn victims were dragged to ornamental fountains to extinguish flames and cool their injuries. Clothing, decorations, and display boards were torn down and used as makeshift bandages and stretchers. Emergency services were overwhelmed with calls. Over 200 separate 911 calls flooded dispatchers. Ambulances rushed in from across the county, transporting victims to specialized burn units. At one point, there were actually more ambulances than needed, despite nearly 100 people being injured. The man dressed as Santa Claus initially thought decorative lighting had exploded. He felt a wave of heat and ran, losing his wig as he escaped. His costume was later found to be speckled with burn marks from droplets of flaming fuel, but he was unharmed. Kim Aguirre and her son survived, though both suffered severe injuries and required years of medical treatment. While their physical wounds eventually healed, the emotional trauma never fully faded. The woman who had offered Kim her place in line survived. Her young son did not. In total, 7 people lost their lives. Among the victims were 22-year-old Pam Stanford, who had been shopping for her wedding ring, and later died in hospital, 45-year-old Patricia Larson, 49-year-old Chandra Kashar, and 1-year-old Alexander Luong. They were joined by pilot Jim Graham, 48-year-old John F. Lewis, and 23-year-old Brian Oliver, who died aboard the aircraft. In the aftermath, questions were raised about development around Buchanan Field. Mall employees said they had long feared an accident, citing foggy conditions and nearby buildings. Many people said the same thing. It was bound to happen eventually. However, investigations found that nearby structures complied with FAA height regulations. The National Transportation Safety Board concluded that the crash was likely caused either by pilot disorientation in dense fog or a possible mid-air collision with an unidentified object. While some planned flight expansions were delayed, Buchanan Field remained operational. Remarkably, parts of Sunvalley Mall reopened the very next day, even before all aircraft debris had been removed. Within a year, the mall was fully restored at a cost of approximately $3 million. Legal action followed. Hundreds of lawsuits were filed, primarily against city planners, resulting in roughly $11 million in settlements and judgments. Today, Buchanan Field is still active, and Sunvalley Mall continues to serve shoppers. Several additional crashes have occurred near the airport since 1985, but none have struck buildings. For those who lived through the Sunvalley Mall disaster, the scars, both physical and psychological, remain. What began as an ordinary night of holiday shopping became one of the most shocking aviation tragedies to ever unfold in a public space.